Hey everyone, welcome back to the District 3 podcast, episode 253. My name is Irving.
And this is Elena.
And Mix couldn't join us this week, but hopefully he joins us next week. Elena, did you manage to go to any of the Pride events this week?
I did not. There's a lot of construction going on, and I was just kind of like, eh.
It was also very hot outside.
Yeah.
You have a baby and stuff, and
Yeah.
it wasn't as bad as it was last year when it comes to like the heat, but it was still pretty hot. I only managed to stay out there for like 2 hours and got to see the actual parade that was at 5 p.m. on Saturday. And it was beautiful to see a lot of diversity and stuff, but after like 2 hours and like 20 minutes, I was like, man, I got to get back into the AC.
I was living through people's Instagram stories though, and like I saw everybody out at nighttime. Like I saw a lot of the bars on Dixon like had like drag shows and stuff like that, so that looked like a lot of fun.
And a lot of them were sold out too. Like I know that I had some friends that were trying to get into like Glitterville, I believe it was called, here in Fayetteville. I don't know what the event was about, but it seemed to be sold out. And I'm glad that the LGBTQ plus community has, an opportunity to just celebrate themselves and have like a welcoming area that allows them just to be themselves, So shout out to all the folks that listen to this episode and to this podcast and from the LGBTQ community. And hopefully we can have, more future episodes where we have representation from them on this podcast.
Yeah.
But I'm excited about today's episode, Elena. Joining us today is someone who actually met at a podcast meetup here locally. Her name is Rashel Hariri. She is the award-winning marketer, startup advisor, and consultant, and creator and host of the She's Interesting with Rashel Hariri podcast, a podcast about business, money, and well-being for women over 30. Welcome, Rashel.
Thank
How are you?
I'm good. Thank you guys for having me on your podcast. I have to say, I'm so glad I met you at the podcasting event that we went to, because it's what I've realized since moving here, because for those who don't know, I'm from Canada, but since I moved here 2 months ago, everyone has been so nice and so friendly and so welcoming. And so I appreciate it. So thanks for having me on today.
How did you feel about the podcast meetup?
I thought it was great.
Because you had just gone here, right?
I literally just gotten here, I think, the week before. And so it was nice to get out there and actually meet other creators, because coming from, I guess it was a little bit of ignorance, but coming from Toronto, which is a bigger city, I was a little bit worried coming to Arkansas, because I didn't know, are there going to be other creators and other podcasters? Yeah. And what you hear about Northwest Arkansas is that there's a lot of corporations here, and the corporations run this part of the state. And so that was my worries. Am I going to find other entrepreneurial people? And like, will I find my community while I'm there? Or is it going to be a lot of corporates and me trying to find my way? So I loved it. I thought it was great. I missed the last one that we had just this past week.
Me too. I missed it too.
Next month.
I was going to ask you, what are some of the, I don't want to say misconceptions, but what are some of the things that you thought of Arkansas before moving here that maybe you're just like, oh, wow, that's not really like I thought it was going to be? Is there any other things you could think of? I was very stereotypical. I thought everybody was going to be like wearing overalls when I moved here from California, and then I moved into Lowell, and it was like a bunch of brown people in my elementary school. So I was surprised there.
Yeah, you know what? I didn't have too many misconceptions, just more of like the corporate thing, because before I moved here, I had to go through a really lengthy green card process. It took like a year and a half, but in total, I'd been here 2.5 years before like I actually moved. So I'd visited once before, and it was literally like in 2021. So COVID was still around. The town was really quiet. And so I just thought it was a very sleepy town. There wasn't much to do, and that it was going to be really corporate. That was really all I thought. But I thought, you know what? It's a good opportunity. Let's go. And I'm someone who just likes to try new things, meet new people. And a friend of mine told me once, she said, Rashel, I'm not worried about you moving to Arkansas, because you're the type of person where no matter where you go, you'll find fun stuff to do. And that's true. Like I always will find an adventure. Even in Toronto, we moved out of the city. We were living in an hour and a half out of the city in a smaller town. And I always found fun things to do. And I was never bored. I think if you're just kind of like sitting there and not exploring, then of course you're going to find boredom.
Yeah, I agree. I think also one interesting thing to note is I feel like you got here at a time where there was kind of like a boom of creators. Because if you go back 2 years, I don't think it was like that. I don't think, you're talking about like, oh, you did find some creators and stuff. I don't think 2 years ago you really found that. There was some creators here and there, but it was more like old school stuff, maybe like just YouTube.
Yeah.
Not a lot of podcasting was happening.
Yeah.
But
Sure.
but the Arkansas Podcast Collective that was created partly by Ty King, who you met.
Yeah.
He and Karen managed to create kind of like a new culture in Arkansas that allowed us, I was part of the first podcast convention that they ran. And for me, it was interesting to see that there was other podcasters around here because we've never connected. So I think you got here now at a time where like there is a boom happening in Arkansas when it comes to podcasting and when it comes to content creation. What do you think, Elena, about that?
Yeah, I think definitely seeing like podcast growth specifically, like those meetups just started, just recently. We've had a couple conventions here and there, but when it comes to creatives and entrepreneurs, there's always been that, right?
Yeah,
we've always had that here.
Sam
but
Walton,
when it comes to like, people who are creating their own things for social media, for themselves and like passionate about what they're doing, that's been starting to grow more.
Yeah.
So,
I do feel like I moved here at a really cool time because I'm seeing the growth and I feel like I can impact the trajectory of what's happening in this area. Whereas when you're from a larger city or you're from California and things have already been there for such a long time, it's like there's still so many pockets of opportunity here and things that you can do to support the community and growth. And then also bring more people into Arkansas and Northwest Arkansas. I made a joke with my friends that I was like, hey, my propaganda campaign is starting on Instagram because everything that I was doing, I was posting it. Like we went to the John Legend concert. We went and we just have been doing so many cool things in Arkansas. And I had a friend message me and be like, wait, where did you move again? And I was like, it's Arkansas.
John Legend's there? What are you?
He knows about
Arkansas?
They're like, oh, you're making it look really cool. And I was like, yeah, because it is. It's really your perspective. I'm sharing my lens of how I'm viewing my experience here. And I'm going to the cool coffee shops and restaurants. And, like I'm in an interview with you guys right now. These are the things that I'm sharing. And I think it's helping to change the perspective that outsiders have of Arkansas. And I find that to be really important. And for me, I like social media and content and creating is a passion of mine. So why wouldn't I then help to build the name for this area that I just moved to? I'm proud of it. I've only been here 2 months, but I'm very proud of it.
Yeah. And I think like I've tried to do that too. Like if you look through my Instagram, you'll see me do a bunch of things, and my cousins in California are like, I didn't even know y'all did those kind of things over there.
Yeah.
Or like right now, there's a lot of like cool concerts that are gonna be coming in the next few months from artists that never been to the area.
Well, I'm going to Deadmau5
Oh, well, there you go.
in August. I'm so excited. I was like, what? Deadmau5 is coming to Northwest Arkansas? But you better believe I'll be posting about that.
Post
so people
Malone's
know.
coming.
TLC.
Yeah, TLC,
Love.
Shaggy.
Yeah.
Very
Like
nice.
Me.
it's, and I know that maybe some other big cities are like, we've had those, but like there's a lot of growth happening here.
Absolutely.
Specifically, in Washington and Bang County. Bang County specifically is like they're about to have their first professional soccer stadium over there.
Wow.
By Pinnacle. So there's a lot of
What really?
yeah. They've the
You know where the
USL.
Angus bar is?
It's like a Mexican bar and grill
Yeah.
kind of.
Or
And
By the-
where the Chewy's is.
No,
Torchy's?
that's a little bit more closer to like the central,
it's
like where
the
the mall
street.
is.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, where the
And
promenade
then,
is.
Yeah, and then there's like a Starbucks.
I think I know where that is. They're actually building a whole development of homes there too. There's a new community that's being built.
Maybe.
I've
Oh,
never-
it's the retirement.
No, I was just there yesterday. I was meeting. We're house
which
hunting. So, it's with I'm doing a plug for Bespoke, but I'm not an ambassador or anything for them.
Okay,
so if
yeah.
no pressure to buy their homes.
Yes.
But they showed me they have like a whole community plan. There's going to be like apartments, townhomes. So it seems like there's a lot happening in that area.
Yeah,
And a stadium.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So
Very
Bellevue,
cool.
yeah, right by West over there.
Wow.
Yeah.
It'll be Arkansas's first ever professional soccer team, men and women.
That's exciting.
I think the men debut first in like 2025, maybe, and then the women in 2026. I could have my years off. I should know this because I've gone to several of their meetings, but it's been a while since I've been. But yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff happening, and I'm excited that you're a part of it now. That you're a part of this
Thank you.
community. Can you talk to me a little bit about like Toronto, because I don't know much about that. I think all people know is like Drake, the Toronto Raptors,
yeah.
probably.
Love the Raptors.
And maybe the
Maple Leafs?
Yeah, the
Hockey?
Maple Leafs
Yeah.
as well.
The Blue Jays, the bat flip.
Yeah.
You guys remember that?
Is there another soccer team over there? Toronto, like
Toronto
MLS?
FC.
FC. Okie dokie.
I've never been to a Toronto FC game.
Oh, really?
I love soccer, but I don't know why I've never.
Oh, man.
I just never.
So how did you, were you born there? Were you born in
No.
Toronto?
So I'll tell you guys my long history. Just
Okey
kidding. How much
Go
time
ahead.
do we have? No, I was born in Iran, and then my parents moved to Toronto. I believe it was like 91. So just before I was in kindergarten, we moved to Toronto. And it was very different. It was very white when we first moved and I was younger. So you can imagine like being this Persian kid and having like rice and stews and kebabs and stuff and like going to school and everybody else had Lunchables. I was like, I want one of those. And my mom was like, this is garbage food. I'm not giving you Lunchables.
It's so bad for you, right? But it looked so good when we were kids.
Yeah. And also I was like, I don't want this delicious like rice and stuff my mom made. I want the Lunchables because that's what all the cool kids have. So yeah, I grew up in Toronto when it was primarily like, you know, not very diverse when I was younger. But over the years, because of immigration, and we had really great prime ministers that were bringing people into the country, there's now so much diversity in Toronto. It is an incredible city where any type of food you want Ethiopian food, you want Ugandan food, you want like Peruvian food, you want Persian food, whatever. It's like a great cultural hub and also really great food, which was one of the things I was worried about leaving and coming here because I'm like, there's no Persian restaurants. There's like one Arabic restaurant that's close. It's called Tout Beirut. I'm also not an ambassador for them. Maybe one day. Yeah, so that's like what I can tell you about Toronto. The city is growing tremendously. A lot of people have also left the city. Like I was one of the people that left Toronto, moved a little bit outside because it's gotten so expensive. And that's not unique to Toronto, right? That's like anywhere, even here in Northwest Arkansas, the prices are going up for homes. And so, you know, you got to find your pocket and where you can move. But there's always something to do in Toronto. There's always new restaurants, lots of beautiful interior design. Like when you go to the restaurants, they put a lot of effort into the ambiance and the feeling and like the drinks and the food. So I really appreciate that about Toronto. And, you know, like I grew up there and I was just like a big fan of the sports teams that we had and representing the Raptors when they were doing really well. And, you know, and the Maple Leafs, they're a great team, but they just never win the Stanley Cup. So
yeah,
it is what
Toronto FC, didn't they win something in the past few years?
The soccer team?
Yeah.
I don't follow the
thought
soccer
they
team
did.
as well.
I think it was probably like 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah.
But healthcare there is pretty nice. Or
Healthcare is
what is your
good.
opinion on it?
So I have mixed feelings. So for example, when I was like in the early 90s and we had just moved, the public healthcare system that we had was a lot better than it is today. So I think we had like dental coverage or vision. One of those was part of the package that you would get. So we have what's called the Ontario Health Insurance Plan, OHIP. So as part, you don't even notice. It's just part of your taxes. It just goes. And so if you have to go to like the emergency room, your doctor's visits, you don't pay anything. You can go to the doctor like 20 times a month. You don't pay anything.
Oh, shit.
You can, you know, like these things are covered. However, because now, ever since COVID happened as well, and I'd say even before COVID, the system is a little bit broken now. We don't have enough nurses. We don't have enough doctors. And so emergency rooms are slow. I'll give you an example. I was sick when I was in Toronto in May, and I had a stomach bug, and I was like, I need an IV. I'm not doing well. So I went to like urgent care, or the emergency room actually. I was waiting. I waited for like 6 hours.
Oh, wow.
And what I realized was I went from one hospital and I walked in and the emergency room was so packed. And I was like, these people are more sick than I am. They're not going to see me for hours. I went to another one that had a better triaging system. But what I realized was on a Friday night in the ER, there was one emergency doctor.
Oh, wow.
One guy. And luckily he was like the kindest, happiest doctor, smiling the whole time until 2 a.m. when he saw me, going from room to room. And so those are some of the issues that we're facing in terms of healthcare in Canada.
Okay.
It's not as perfect as you would think it is. It's great that everyone has access no matter what your income bracket is. But on top of that, like your work also gives you insurance. So you get chiropractor, physiotherapy, massage, you know, therapy, all of these things.
I wonder if that's a misconception for the general American population in regards, because I think we all think that like in Canada, just everyone has access to healthcare and things are fine and dandy.
Well, you have access, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, like
Like, I
your
mean,
wait
that's
time,
awesome.
that's another
But
question.
my access though is I'm also talking about like getting to see the doctor right away and not having to wait that long.
Yeah.
That's what I think about. Like I just think
Absolutely.
just walk in, doctors are waiting for you.
Oh, let me tell you, if you need an MRI, sometimes you got to wait months to get an MRI.
Oh, wow.
I had a friend who had kidney stones, and you know how painful it is to have kidney stones. They were like, for you to see a specialist, it's going to be 3 weeks from now.
Oh, no.
And then if you need a surgery, which she did because she had a big kidney stone, like it might be, you know, like another month after that. And luckily she knew like the head of one of the departments in the hospital, and she was able to get in there earlier. But Like that's the kind of free system we have.
Yeah, that's what it's like if you don't have health insurance in America. They'll be like, oh, there's a waiting list for you because you don't have health insurance.
Yeah.
I grew up without health insurance, and like my father had, he had to get his gallbladder removed, and they were like, yeah, you can wait 3 weeks, or we can do it right now. And
yeah,
so
it depends how
like,
much you want to pay.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, it's like it kind of depends on how much you want to pay, but those are your two options right now. So.
Oh man, yeah, I know. In some other countries, in Mexico, they won't even see you if you don't have insurance.
Yeah.
So I think in the U.S., even though like we have a lot of issues and stuff, I'm glad that like legally you have to be seen. Yeah. And most of the times when I've gone to like the ER and stuff, there's not a huge wait line.
That's good.
Sometimes there is, but like in weird situations when a lot of like bad stuff happening in one area at a time. But usually, I don't think I've like waited longer than like 30 minutes to get into the ER.
Amazing.
So it's been good. So how do you feel about just like the transition from living in Canada to the US? Because like what are the differences that you're seeing as you live here now?
Well, I think like I've even posted some TikToks about this. My TikTok is not great, guys, so don't judge me, but like I've done some comparisons of what it's like. I think my experience, obviously the South is also different from the other parts of the states, right? Every region, every state has its own flavor. And I'd say here, people are just like a lot more friendly. It's a slower pace. They have the time to talk to you. Where growing up in Toronto, and again, Toronto is not representative of all of Canada. It's just like a busy city. It's like, hey, how are you doing? Good to see you, blah, blah, blah. Take care. See you later. If someone falls, let's say in the subway, 100 people will walk by. Maybe one person will stop to be like, hey, do you need help? Are you okay? Because they're busy. It's that kind of vibe. Like you got to go, go, go. And so what I've noticed here is the kindness, the openness to have conversations, like the fact that I have gone to the dog park and made so many friends and we've exchanged phone numbers, like that wouldn't necessarily happen in Toronto, because if you're from Toronto, chances are you either grew up there or you moved there through university or your work. And so it's very much like you know who your friends are and you kind of stay with that. I'm personally someone who's always made new friends. So for me, it's a bit of a different situation. But there's this joke that part of Toronto is like no new friends because if you have your group of friends, you've probably known them since kindergarten.
Oh, wow.
And like that's your crew. And you have your family that probably lives like half an hour away from you and you're set.
So this is more your vibe, like the Southern hospitality kind of thing?
Yeah, I love it. And I will say at first I was a little suspicious. Like I was like, what?
Why are you being so nice?
Like, why be so nice? What do you want? But then I realized nothing. It's just how people are. And that I really feel like my cortisol levels started to like decline, which was nice. Yeah.
You know, when I went to New York, like was it three or 4 months ago, I believe, I had a lot of people tell me that it was my first time ever going to New York. And people were like, oh, people are rude over there. Like they're just like they'll see you and like they won't even acknowledge you in the street. And I went and I didn't feel that. I felt more like people are just busy.
Yeah.
And they're minding their business. They need to get to their job. They need to get home. Yeah. Like I didn't necessarily feel any kind of like negative or weird vibes. But I also did understand how we're different over here in the sense that like we open doors. When we're walking in like a trail or something and someone's like coming the opposite direction from you, they're going to be like, hey, how you doing? Or like, hello.
So nice.
Like they'll say something so it won't be awkward, right?
Yeah.
So I think there's like levels to that. I loved my New York experience. You were just there like a week ago, right? Or 2 weeks ago?
Yeah, I was there a week ago. I love New York. New York is always fun to have like a quick little short trip over there. But what I found the biggest difference between Canadians and Americans is Canadians are nice. And they're like polite, but I don't think that they're the most friendly people. I think Canadians are very like, like quiet, very much like, because it's a colonial country, right?
Yeah.
British, keep to yourself type of thing. Whereas I find Americans, and I think it's based on the fact that you guys have so many states and different places to live, you're used to moving from one state to another and making friends and building a community, bringing new people into your life. Whereas in Canada, there's maybe only like 4 cities that people would actually want to live and move to. So if you're in Toronto, chances are you're going to stay in Toronto forever because that's where all the action is, or you're going to move to like Vancouver or maybe Montreal, but not very likely because it's bilingual. So, but here you meet people like, yeah, I used to live in like Texas and I lived in Washington and I lived in New York and now I'm here. Like you're used to trying to meet new people and make conversation. And even when we're traveling too, like we always meet other Canadians and it's awesome. But the Americans are always like, hey, come with us. Like, let's go do something. It's a different level of, I think, just being more like personable and letting people in.
And you started your business in Canada?
I sure did.
And how was that like?
It was much simpler than it was to set it up here. I'll tell you that. It's so straightforward in Canada. It's either like you're a sole proprietor, a partner, or you incorporate. And that's it. So I set up my business there. I actually spent the past 15 years in the marketing space. So 12 years I worked in corporate. I worked in social enterprise. I worked in banking. I worked at food and beverage at McDonald's for about 4.5 years. I worked at Shopify. And then that's when I decided I want to take a break from corporate and have my own business. It's something I always wanted to do. And Shopify is all about entrepreneurship. So I had access to incredible entrepreneurs and tech entrepreneurs, e-commerce entrepreneurs. And so I decided I want to leave this to actually work with these visionaries and help them with their marketing, get their marketing engine up and running from 0 to 1 and get them going. And so that was a really easy process to set it up. I literally quit my job, set up my my incorporation, and then I just went with the races. And honestly, guys, sometimes when you're used to, should I pause?
You're good.
Okay.
Just a random ambulance outside. We're used to it.
Saving lives, no big deal.
The fire department's like 2 minutes away from here. So
Oh,
that's
okay.
why,
Yeah, I was like, do we break? What do we do?
You're good.
Yeah, I think sometimes your career or your life trajectory just like pushes you somewhere at the right time when you're ready for it. And that was me in 2021. I was like, I can't do this corporate thing anymore. Shopify had grown to like a 10,000 person company. I was so far removed from leadership that I was like, I don't want to do this. Like, I want to work with like really, really smart people that have a vision and help them bring their vision to life. And so I started working with tech startups and direct-to-consumer brands across the globe. Like, I had clients in the US and in Austin, in Europe, in the Middle East, and it's been really great. And so now that I'm in Arkansas and I'm registered again as a business, I want to start working with like the different startups in the area and really like give back to the community with my skills.
And where does the idea to create this podcast come from? Is this your first podcast you've ever created?
Yeah, this is my first podcast. Actually, years and years ago when YouTube was still small and people weren't really monetizing it, I actually did an interview show with my sister. It was called Listen Mister. Okay. And it was along the same lines of like interviewing really powerful women. And my name is Rashel. Her name is Massa. So together you get the Mister. And we'd always start the episodes with like, listen, mister, like we have something to say. So we're interviewing this like model who's now an entrepreneur or something. And we're going to ask her about her business. So I did that before you could even monetize it. And then, work got in the way and I was highly ambitious in the corporate world. So we stopped that. So technically that was kind of, but not really.
What year was that?
I think that was 2011.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very early day, right? Like Instagram wasn't even a thing yet. So with She's Interesting, the concept is really just interviewing incredible women. We know that in the U.S., only 3% of women or less than 3% of women make it to 7 figures. That is a very depressing statistic, and we need to change that. We need to create more opportunity for women to thrive in their businesses. And so with She's Interesting, what I'm doing is highlighting the story of incredible women, whether they are 7-figure founders, investors, which is very important because there's a small pool of women investors too, or they're change makers. And by highlighting these stories, my goal is to get other women who maybe feel stuck or feel like I have all these big ambitions, but I'm not really sure how to get to the next level to learn from these stories. And I also share my own experience as well, taking the leap, leaving corporate and starting my business and making 6 figures, very shortly after leaving. And it's important for me to connect with other women. I grew up with 4 older sisters and a mom, a widowed mom. And so I've always had really like strong women around me. And I've always been a champion for equality and for supporting women. And so I started the podcast, She's Interesting, because I'm like, why not? Let's talk about women. And also from my time at Shopify, we know that the term entrepreneur has basically been taken over by the Patagonia vests and, the dudes in the tech world. And so a lot of people and women, especially and women of color, do not use that term. If you go on social media, a lot of women say, I'm a business owner, I'm a small business owner, or sometimes they use the term founder. But at this point, I'm like, let's just start calling it what it is. You're an entrepreneur. You have your own business. If you're making money through something that you've created, that's what you are. So let's own that.
Titles matter, right? And I feel
absolutely.
like a lot of the times in general, and probably women more, of course, and women of color as well, tend to like be too humble with their titles when they shouldn't be, because straight white males won't be.
Yeah, it's that Chad energy, right? Yeah. Like channel your inner Chad. What would Chad do? So I absolutely agree. I think there's so much opportunity out there, and I don't want us to feel like just like our appearance is going to be a blocker for us in the future. Like, it is what it is. I'm a woman of color, but I don't let that stop me, and I don't really care. I have ideas. I'm smart, and so are so many of these women that are listening to the podcast. They're brilliant women, but because of societal structures and the way things are set up, we're often excluded from the table. And so, you know what? Let's build our own table. Let's invite who we want into it. Let's build our own personal board of advisors and people that can coach and support us so that we can get our ideas into the world. Most companies that have women in their leadership team, they actually are more profitable. And women that start companies take less investor equity because, number one, there's a lot of barriers to entry for women. Number two, a lot of women don't know about the investing, like the investing space, or how much they could get in terms of like a boost for their business. And so let's talk about these things. I think it's great that women can have bootstrapped companies and raise them to 7 figures. That's fantastic, and own 100% equity in their companies. But if you can get from 7 figures to 8 to 9 by getting a little bit of equity infused from investors, why not do that?
You know, one of the things that still surprises me, but it doesn't surprise me, is to hear like the experiences that women have even when they're in like important roles in their company, their experiences with men.
Yeah.
That they either, whether it being something where it's like they're made to feel uncomfortable, they're made to feel like their opinion doesn't matter, and you're like, man, we're in 2024. Like, you would think by now there would be more regulations and just overall, like they would be given the importance that I believe that they deserve, but they're still having to deal with a lot. Did you experience anything like that when you were in the corporate world? Anything that you can talk about? Not maybe like in super detail, but
for sure. I have a really
Name the
interesting story. I will, and we will publish them everywhere. No, I have a really great story of when I was speaking on a panel, and my fellow panelists, it was just the two of us, and it was an e-commerce panel in Canada, and they would fly everybody out. They flew me out. I took my mom, and I was like, Mom, come see me talk. And this guy was so arrogant. But by the end of it, he was like, you're amazing. How can I work with you? And I was like, hold on. Like, let's chill.
Get in line.
So let me tell you the story. So basically, it was this conference that I was brought to. At the time, I was working at Shopify. And we were supposed to be on this panel. And it was me and this other guy. And the night before the panel, they were bringing all the panelists together so that we can meet each other and, build a little bit of rapport before we get on stage. So I meet this guy, and I'm like, hi, nice to meet you. My name is Rashel. He introduces himself, and he goes, don't worry. I'm going to make this easy for you. I said, make what easy? Ugh. And first of all, I'm 5'2". This guy's probably like 6'2", and I'm looking up at him like, make what easy, right? Don't at me, bro. So he...
Catch me outside.
Exactly. So I go, okay, what do you mean make what easy? He's like, tomorrow. Like, don't worry about it. I'm going to make it super easy for you. And I was like, I don't need you to make anything easy for me. I'm fully prepared for tomorrow. And then they were all going out for drinks, and I was like, I don't have time to hang out with these kind of people, right? Like, this is not who I want to mingle with. I brought my mom here. Peace out. It was nice to meet you guys. I'll see you tomorrow, and I'm going to kick ass. So, be careful. So
I'll make it easy for you, bro.
Yeah. I know. I'm going to make it hard for you to kind of keep up with me. That's what I'm going to do. So the next day we had the panel, and I killed it. Like, I crushed the panel. And as I'm getting off the stage, I walk right by him. I didn't even look at him when I left because I was like, I don't have time for these kind of people, right? Like, for these kind of games. Okay. And his whole team swarmed me after. And he came up after and was like, you were amazing. And I said, what did you think? Why do you think they invited me to speak on this panel, right? And I was like, let this be a lesson to you in the future, not to do this to women. And unfortunately, that night we had a dinner and we were sat next to each other. But by the end of the night, luckily I'm a patient person as well. Throughout the dinner, we had an opportunity to talk, and I was able to help him recognize some of his biases and some of the issues that he has. And I think like the onus shouldn't be on me to teach a man, also a man of color as well, not to talk to women this way. But I literally was like, I might have to sit next to this guy anyway. Let's use this as an opportunity to enlighten this person. Yeah. And by the end of it, I hope that I changed his mind and he had a different perspective on how to work with women. But these things happen all the time. Like another time I had a colleague of mine when I was at McDonald's, we were at an event, and a very like renowned speaker was talking to us. And he goes, so are you on this person's team? And I said, no, we're peers. Like, why would you just assume that I report to him? We're both the same level. We're managers. So these things happen. And I think because I've experienced it myself, I'm like, let's talk about it on the podcast because I'm not the only one. And let's talk about how to correct these behaviors when they happen. The worst thing you can do is stay silent when someone is trying to make you feel small.
And look, I can tell you that I haven't been perfect in all my interactions. When I was younger, I think I've grown a lot to see certain things that maybe before I didn't see them as a problem, specifically relating to like the way other people treat women. And throughout the years, I've been able to kind of grow and get a better understanding of stuff. But there's still a lot of people, specifically people in power, that still today will make comments like that, or maybe make women feel in their workplace that their opinion doesn't matter, or even like attribute whatever their opinion is to like a temperament issue. I've heard that a lot from like my women friends. So what is some of the feedback that you've received from your listeners to this podcast? What is some cool feedback that you would like to share that you've heard from people?
Just amazing feedback. It's been, and that's really what keeps me going, is when people message me and they say, hey, for example, I did an interview with Pauline Yegnazar-Peck. She is a therapist that's out, or psychologist that's out in California. And we talked a lot about like the daughters of immigrants, because that's who she focuses on, and trauma and generational trauma. I had people message me and say, hey, I cried. I listened to that episode and I cried. That really resonated with me, and she gave me tips on how to get over some of the blockers that I have. Or my own sister was on, and you know, it's like, it's different when it's your own family. My sister sent me a message and goes, hey, I was just on the treadmill listening to your episode with Pauline, and holy smokes. I don't want to swear, but
you can cuss.
Okay. Holy shit. It was such a good episode. Like, this is amazing, Rashel. Good job. Yeah. So I've just been getting a lot of love from a lot of women and people saying, hey, this is exactly the content we've been looking for. And you know why? That's the reason why I started it. And that's why I'm focusing. My target audience is women over 30. Because I'm a woman over 30 and I couldn't find the content that I wanted. And I was frustrated because every time I'd go online, it was like another alpha bro on the microphone trying to tell you, hey, this is how you have to run a business and you got to work and hustle 18 hours a day. And then you find out this guy has like a wife or a girlfriend who's taking care of the rest of his life so that he can hustle 18 hours. Right. Yeah. And I was like, well, everybody needs a wife then, right? I would love to have a wife so that I could just like work and make money. And so that's where She's Interesting came from, because I'm like, let's talk to these really valuable and super smart women that are making 7+ figures and ask them about their journey. And I ask them specific questions like, when did you fail? How did you take your from idea to product to launch to 7 figures? How did you get there? Because most of us need to know that path. And the cool thing too is my listeners aren't just women, because it's called She's Interesting, but we're not sitting there talking about, you know, like eyelashes and makeup. Sometimes we might, but we're talking about how to get more money and be impactful. And so 25% of my listeners are men too. So I've gotten great feedback from men messaging me and saying, your podcast is amazing. I sent it to some of my women friends and my wife. That in itself, I'm like, great, I'm on the right path. This is what I should be doing.
Yeah.
What are some of your favorite podcast episodes you've recorded that you recommend to people that are about to listen to your podcast for the first time? Yeah. What are some like go-tos that you recommend?
Oh my God. I love them all. I have to say, each episode, I was just listening to some this morning because I sometimes forget that my podcast is out there. Like I record it and I move on to promotion. And so I was listening to my own podcast this morning and I'm like, damn, it's good. Yeah, I need to, you know, like even for you guys, listen to your own work sometimes to remind yourself of why you're doing what you're doing. It really helps. So one of the first episodes that I launched this season, in season 2, is with Haley Bogart. She's the founder of HB Face. She has a brow bar business in Toronto and she's expanding. Haley is a powerhouse. Okay. This woman does not give up in the face of adversity. When she was in her early 20s, her mom and brother passed away from mental health and addiction. And instead of, you know, like going to a dark place, she channeled that energy and created this empire for herself. She now has a 7-figure business. She is unbreakable. And so she talks a lot about her journey and how she started from doing eyebrows in her apartment, how she basically got money from her friends to start her business, and they all took a risk and gave her like, you know, $50K each, and she had to pay them back within the first year. I think it's a really, really great story for anyone who maybe has gone through adversity and maybe feeling a bit lost right now and looking for motivation. But so many of the episodes are like that, right? That's why it's called She's Interesting, because I really dig into the human element. Who are these women? How did they get to where they are? And then now let's talk about business and like money, and let's all learn from you. Yeah.
One of the cool things about just podcasting in general is that you're able to bring in experts to your show and in a way learn from them, right? So I'm interested to like know what are some of the things that you've learned, because you've had a lot of like powerful women come to your podcast, and it must be cool to have like that wealth of knowledge show up right in front of you and just tell you their secrets and like what's worked for them, right?
Yeah. I'd say one of the most interesting things that I learned was when I interviewed Eva Lau. So Eva Lau and her husband, they created a company called Wattpad. And they created this company, and it was an app before the iPhone. So you can imagine trying to create an app when like, where is it housed? Yeah. So they created this company, and she really taught me about their process of almost quitting and giving up this vision to when they actually sold it for almost $1 billion. Mm-hmm. And what she taught me in that episode was you need to learn and understand, your business journey, at what point to give up and what point to keep going. And she specifically pinpointed and explained that before you give up, you need to know how much you're willing to lose. So in her case, her and her husband are both engineers. They had a house, they had 2 kids. And she said, I was willing to give up and go back to zero. I was willing to lose the house, move in with my in-laws. And that's as far as I was going. I was not willing to go into debt or go into the negatives for this business. But I also believed, hey, I'm an engineer. My husband's an engineer. If we get to zero, we can always build our way back up. But when you're in the negative, it is much harder to get out of that space. Mm-hmm. And so what she talked to me about, which really resonated with me, is she's also a spiritual person. So she prayed. She prayed about it. She really reflected on it. And then she knew her why and what she was willing to give up. Mm-hmm. And she also gave herself a timeline. So think about these things, like meditate on it, pray about it, know what you're willing to lose, how far you're willing to go. And the interesting story with her is that literally they had a few months of runway left that she was like, I said 2 years, we got to wait 2 years. The iPhone launched. And because they waited, the iPhone launched, and it completely changed the trajectory of their business. They were going from making like $5 a month to the iPhone launching and their company really blowing up. Yeah. So
yeah, Wattpad was huge whenever I was a kid.
Yeah,
everybody did their fan fictions on there.
There you go. Yeah, and they sold it to I think a Korean company or a company in Asia. I think it was actually a Filipino company. Sorry, I'm mixing up where it was from, but they sold for so much money, and a lot of the stories on Wattpad became movies. Yeah, and TV shows. Yeah.
I did not know about any of this.
Yeah, it's a very cool story. So listen to that episode 2, episode 5, season 1.
Episode 5, yeah.
Okie dokie. I will check that one out. What are some of the goals that you have for not only your podcast, but just you in general? What do you want to do? What do you see yourself? No, I don't want to ask like, what do you see yourself in 5 years, which is the most cliche question.
This
right?
really feels like an interview. What are your strengths?
What are your weaknesses too? But where do you want to be? Like, what do you want to do professionally? Because I think you're the kind of person that has thought about that probably plenty, or has something planned maybe. I don't know.
For sure.
What do you think?
I would really like to continue to grow She's Interesting. I know that it's an impactful platform for women. I know exactly who my target audience is, and I want to continue to grow She's Interesting. And what I mean by that is growing it to have more actually like resources and tools for women that are in business, being able to connect them with investors, maybe in the future having a syndicate for She's Interesting, right? These are a lot of the big ideas that I'm throwing out there with myself, and then just basically building the roadmap to get there. When I was in Toronto, I was even doing IRL events and partnering with, like law firms and investment firms to have a group of women come together in a really elevated setting, but kind of like how I share like bold and real life tidbits on the podcast, same thing in person. And so I want to continue to do that. And I'd love to do that here in Arkansas. Now that I'm based here, it's like, who should I be getting in the community to come together? What kind of like courses can we offer to women who are running businesses here? So that's some of the big ideas for She's Interesting. And then for my consulting side and what I'm working on there, I really want to be able to help put Arkansas on the map for startups and tech companies. We know that there was a mass exodus from Silicon Valley. A lot of people went to Austin and different areas and different towns. And it's like, a lot of people went to Tulsa too. And that's not too far from here. So hop on over to NWA because there's a lot of resources here. I actually met up with some people that were in the Startup Junkie Accelerator program, Fuel. And one of them's from Egypt. He flew all the way from Egypt and came here for this program that they have. Wow. There was another guy that was here from LA. There's a lot of resources here, and I see the potential. And as someone who has like that background working with entrepreneurs and on the marketing side of things, I feel like there's a way that I can support this community. I haven't quite figured out exactly what that is, but I'm putting it out into the universe. Like, let's see what comes back. Yeah.
You just got here already doing a lot.
Thanks. It doesn't. I'm one of those people that's like, am I? I feel like I could be doing more.
You just got here and you're doing this and you're doing that. Usually it takes people a while to just kind of like get their feet wet.
But there are a good amount of people who move out here from, and they do a lot of social media things. There's a couple from New York that moved out here, the NWA transplants. on Instagram.
Yeah, I've seen them.
And
I think I follow them.
Yeah, like they did like a really big, now they're the go-to for a new restaurant. Like they're there now.
Love that.
and
Good
they
for
do
them.
that.
Yeah.
There's a girl from DC who moved out here. She just moved back out, but Anika Malik, I think that's her name.
I think I
don't
follow
know
her.
her.
Yeah,
I should find her.
Or Anella. Anella. I think
I forgot
that's
her name,
Yeah.
but I know who you're talking about.
She did like a lot. So it's like we've had a lot of people from across the United States come over here and like show us off, So it'll be interesting to see more of that startup, entrepreneur things that you do, and especially highlighting women in businesses. I'll be excited to see that. So.
Who are some of your, going back to your podcast, who are some of the people that you still wanting to interview for your She's Interesting podcast? Like maybe
So
some
many.
like 2 or 3 that you could think of that you're like, man, it would be cool if I could interview her.
Yeah. So one person that I would love to get on the podcast, her name is Elisa Vitti, and she wrote the book In the Flow, and she has like a whole research team that focuses on women's cycle and hormones. And she talks about the 4-week cycle and how to hack the cycle and when you are the most creative and, when to have your meetings, when to plan your speaking engagements and do all of these things based on your cycle. So I don't know if people who are listening know this, but men's hormones, you guys are lucky. Every day in the morning, there you go, restarted with your testosterone and whatever. For women,
My wife has given
4
me
weeks.
this lesson countless times.
There you go.
I understand
See?
it.
So I would love to have her on the podcast because I still have so many questions about the type of nutrition and what you should be eating and the type of workouts that you should have. And I think that would be really, really helpful for my group, especially because it's women 30 plus. So we also get into perimenopause, and I have some questions about that as well. She would be incredible. I'm trying to think of who else. I actually think it would be really interesting to interview some other big podcasters as well. I love Mel Robbins. I listen to her podcast religiously. That would be a dream to get her on my podcast and talk to her about her journey and her books and the research that she's done.
Oh, cool. Well, we're putting that out to the
Yeah.
world right now so that
Put it out in the universe.
energy
Sprinkle.
will come back. We'll come back to hit you. One of the questions that we ask every one of our guests is, what do you do to take care of your mental health?
That's something that I've been working on throughout the years. So number one, therapy helps. I haven't been in therapy in a while because I also think it's like seasons. Sometimes you want to go in therapy and then sometimes you want to live, right? Like I'm like, I don't feel like talking today. I'm tired of like talking about the way I feel. I want to feel the way I feel and like get out into the world. So definitely for anyone who's listening, therapy is great. I also need exercise. So when I don't exercise, I don't feel my best. And mentally, I don't think as clearly as I do when I exercise. Even if it's just 30 minutes of walking on the treadmill, that's better than sitting on the couch, right? So like turn on the TV, get on a treadmill, or go for a walk. Being in nature is another one. Spending time with friends and family, journaling when I can, and also like meditation and connecting with the spiritual side. I think a lot of like the wellness industry has been selling like candles and bubble baths and like do all of these things to relax. But if you're not focusing on what's inside and your soul and actually like developing your spiritual qualities, you're always going to go back to not feeling your best because you haven't worked on the most important thing, which is your core.
That's good advice. Very good advice. Yes. And if people want to connect with you, want to work with you, where's a good place to first? We'll talk about social media right after, but like an email or anything that you can give where people can connect with you or reach out to you?
For sure. You can message me anywhere. I'm on Instagram. I'm on LinkedIn. And you can email me at hello@RashelHariri.com. My website's also just RashelHariri.com or she'sinteresting.com. They both point to the same place. And you can reach out to me there, and I'm happy to connect with people. Like even earlier last week, I had a call with a female entrepreneur in Siloam Springs, and we were talking about her growth plans for her business. So there's a lot of cool things that are happening here, and I'm happy to be a resource where I can.
And then I really liked your website, by the way.
Yes,
Thank you. I made that myself. That was all me, guys.
Yeah.
If anyone needs help with their
there we go.
website.
There we go.
Let me know.
And where's your podcast available?
Everywhere. It's on YouTube, it's on Spotify, it's on Apple Podcasts, and a bunch of other smaller streaming services as well.
Okay, we'll put links so people can follow it straight from the episode. But Rashel, thank you for making time to be here today.
I appreciate it.
I feel like we need to do this again. I feel like there's more that we can talk about.
Oh, we could talk for hours. Let's do it.
I love having other podcast hosts here on the podcast because we can just like talk and everything's just so smooth and everything.
Yappers.
Yeah.
Keep
We
on.
are.
We love to talk. But yeah, thank you for being here. We appreciate you, and we're just excited to see your growth and everything that you get involved with. So
thank you.
make sure you follow Rashel also on social media. Like she mentioned, mentioned, but for everybody listening, that was the end of episode 253 of the District 3 podcast. My name is Edwin.
And this is Elena.
Signing off.